Hey everyone, and we are back for the episode 1 serious Q&A. Let's take a look at some questions. How did Cersei know that Tyrion was Daenerys' hand? Did she send a raven to everyone, telling everyone the members of her small council? Did Tyrion update his Facebook status? This is an interesting question. In fact, it's a bit striking that Cersei knows that Daenerys is coming at all, let alone that Tyrion is her hand. Dany's element of surprise has completely been ruined somehow. And this is notably the opposite of the books, where no one expects Jon Connington's invasion. Now, in past seasons, it has been established that the Iron Throne does have some intel sources in the East. Joffrey, for example, in his smartest moment ever, worries about Dany's dragons in Season 3, Episode 7, and Tywin is a bit surprised that Joffrey knows about them. Perhaps this information came from Jorah's last intel report in Qarth and somehow leaked to him? It's hard to say. Still, in this very scene, Tywin dismisses the dragons, which means his intel isn't so great on Dany, considering she's currently conquering Slaver's Bay. So if I were to make an argument on why Cersei now has better, faster intelligence, it's that Qyburn is doing a much better job than Varys. Varys was probably keeping information from the throne, while Qyburn is not. In the books, Qyburn would simply walk down to the docks and ask sailors about what's happening in the world. If Show Qyburn did the same, he would likely find the docks abuzz with stories. There would be merchants who spotted Dany's fleet in Volantis, sailors who had been to Slaver's Bay when Tyrion ruled the city. It wouldn't be that hard to piece everything together, and Dany's armada seems to be traveling at a snail's pace. If you remember, Varys went all the way to Westeros and back east again with the Tyrell and Martell fleets. So the problem isn't really that Cersei knows about Daenerys' movements, it's that Daenerys' movements are so damn slow. Euron, for example, went all the way from here to here, and Dany still hasn't arrived. How does Littlefinger know Brienne fought the Hound? Well, the simplest explanation is that Pod is going around bragging to everyone about how great Brienne is. It makes me wonder if Pod also spilled the beans that the Hound was the one with Arya. Now, Littlefinger knowing this information does show that he still has his ear to the ground and is still scheming. It stands to reason that Littlefinger has several spies and informants throughout the various armies. Now, I doubt we will see this happen, but it would be a great twist to find out that Pod is secretly an agent of someone like Varys or Littlefinger. In fact, in the book, Podrick is a bit suspicious. Even setting aside his odd loyalty to Tyrion and his desire to follow around Brienne, there is another event that just doesn't sit right. When Tyrion is imprisoned after the death of Joffrey, he sends out Pod to find Bronn. Pod takes his sweet time bringing Bronn back to Tyrion, which irks Tyrion a bit, but Pod also doesn't tell Tyrion that Jaime has returned to the city. Author error aside, I can't think of a reason why Podrick would keep this information from Tyrion unless he was an agent of someone else. Now, I don't think Pod is a Littlefinger agent, as he once saved Tyrion's life, but I'm open to him being, say, a Varys agent. Do you think D&D are untalented writers, or do you think this is down to them being lazy after writing the series for over 6 years? Oof, this is a huge question. Well, I definitely don't think either David Benioff or D.B. Weiss are untalented or lazy writers. Far from it. Benioff has a book called City of Thieves, which is a great read, and D.B. Weiss has a solid book called Lucky Wanderboy. The two know a great deal about pacing a story, how to tie in thematic elements, and they think a great deal about character motivation, emotion, and the human condition. So why has this descended to becoming X-Men Origins Wolverine? Well, it's a complicated problem. Benioff and Weiss are used to writing fairly straightforward tales, and Ice and Fire is beyond complex. Had they started the story by themselves from scratch, they would have never attempted something with the scope of Ice and Fire. And to be fair, some even claim that George R.R. Martin has lost control of the scope of his story and will never be able to bring everything together. And these two are no George R.R. Martin. I think Benioff and Weiss are actually more focused on advancing story themes than being true to life. Dany returning to Dragonstone makes thematic sense. She's following in Aegon the Conqueror's footsteps and all of that. But it doesn't make any logical sense. Why would you land a huge army on this tiny island that doesn't have any food? You literally had to sail past Dorne to get there. Likewise, Cersei being queen makes sense thematically. She's achieved power while losing everyone she loves. But it doesn't make sense logically at all. George R. R. Martin, on the other hand, is a hyper-logical writer, which is one of the reasons why his writing is often so real and so brutal. Another issue is there's way too much fan service, and this is tough to shy away from as they are the consumers. Clearly the fans hated Dorne, and so they scrapped that plot. And clearly the fans love Bronn and Lyanna Mormont, and so they give them more screen time. Tyrion's drunk quips look great on a t-shirt, and this is also the reason why the main characters have become invincible heroes. But heroes aren't real, and George R.R. Martin's writing style is to actually give us the exact opposite of what we want. Take the last episode with Arya. We all got this feeling that the viewer was supposed to root for her as she poisons the one-dimensionally evil Freys. And later, she meets the good Lannister soldiers and decides not to kill them. Now, in a traditional entertainment sense, this seems normal. Arya is the hero, heroes kill bad guys, but not good guys. But really, logically speaking, Arya is a human being who has gone off the deep end in the show and is frigging insane. She clearly doesn't understand right and wrong anymore, and is delusional. If George R.R. Martin wrote the scene with the soldiers would have told their stories about how they missed home, and then Arya would have killed them anyway because one of them didn't look at her right. Or the soldiers would have murdered her. Now that would have been real. Why is Sam spending his time at the Citadel shoveling shit and pouring food? I thought that the Citadel was supposed to train him in certain fields so that he could forge his Maester chain. These tasks seem more suited for servants or serfs, not maesters. Well, Sam is an acolyte, and I imagine that they do have some humbling tasks for him. In the books, for example, Pate does take care of Maester Walgrave. That said, the montage makes it look like this was his entire life. What about classes? What about lectures? What about research? The closest thing we get to this is Sam helping an Archmaester dissect a body. I feel the montage should have had him in class and studying quite a bit. I mean, we should remember that Oberyn Martell spent years at the Citadel. Somehow he tolerated all of the work. Sam looks like his soul is being crushed. And this is a bit odd as, at the Wall, he was a steward and Maester Aemon's assistant. He was certainly responsible for all that comes with that. Dealing with Aemon's bedpans, helping him bathe, cleaning up bird shit. Sam is no stranger to dirty work. At least he's not freezing his butt off at the Wall. We know from the trailer that Bran makes it back to Winterfell. Does that mean he will be king in the North over Jon? This is something that would have been interesting had Sansa been crowned queen and we were still in a story that had feudal succession. Bran was Robb's heir, he was a prince, and he did rule Winterfell for half a year. Bran's return would indeed make him king in the North, and he would have reason to take that title from Sansa. The problem is, the show has already completely abandoned feudal succession, with Cersei, Olenna, and Ellaria taking power. Jon seems to have been declared king in the North solely because Lyanna Mormont thought he was courageous and a good leader, and everyone else just sort of followed suit. Succession is just out the window. Of course, without succession, this makes Jon's defense of the Karstarks and Umbers holding Carhold on the last hearth a bit weird. He literally usurped his sister's seat, but is arguing against other people usurping theirs. Now, I suppose one could make the argument that succession is still around, but the North is deeply sexist, which is why Sansa was passed over. But that makes Lyanna Mormont's endorsement of Jon in this case a bit weird. I bring up the sexism argument because the North is probably also against people with disabilities. For this reason, Bran might have not been accepted as king. He's not a fighter, and he likely can't father children. But undeniably, he is also Robb's chosen heir. I somehow suspect that the show is not even going to bring up this issue, though it is rather important for the brewing Sansa-Jon feud that Sansa no longer has a claim. So is the Citadel just cool with Gilly being there? I'm assuming that's a room that the Citadel gave Sam, but I'm wondering why Gilly and her son are there. Do they just hide under the bed if any maesters stop by? Well, I think Gilly and the little one are set up outside the Citadel. Now, it should be noted that the Maesters take a vow of celibacy, just like the Kingsguard and the Night's Watchmen. Though, just like those other orders, the celibacy vow is rarely kept. In the books, the local hangout for the Acolytes is the Quill and Tankard, which doubles as a brothel. So the Maesters would probably just turn a blind eye to Sam going off to Gilly's each evening. I'm not quite sure where Sam got the money to put Gilly up, but maybe Jon sent him with a bunch of money. I was actually really disappointed they didn't show us more of Sam's life in Oldtown, his classes, his classmates, his homework, but alas, we do learn about his dirty work. Have you noticed that Jaime said that Euron burned the Lannister fleet at Casterly Rock and not Lannisport during the Greyjoy Rebellion? Makes it sound like Lannisport doesn't exist in the show. Yeah, this is something that definitely got retconned. In our famous Season 1 scene where Tyrion is a friggin' horrible bastard to Theon, he mentions that the fleet was burned at Lannisport.
Tell me, how do you think Balon Greyjoy would feel if he could see his only surviving son has turned lackey? I still remember seeing my father's fleet burn in Lannisport.
So much like writing Dorne on the map instead of Sunspear or the Water Gardens, the showrunners are clearly trying to simplify the geography to keep the viewer up to speed. It is rather interesting that they've changed Euron's backstory a bit. In the books, Victarion is the one who burns the ships at Lannisport, though it was Euron's idea, and Euron was exiled for having sex with or raping Victarion's wife. The show places him, and Jaime as well, on Pike during the siege and makes his exile related to that. Jaime being on Pike makes the whole situation even more interesting. That would mean Jaime, Ned, Robert, Jorah, and Thoros were all together as battle buddies. Ned and Jaime being in the same place being the oddest part of this, as their relationship was really icy in Season 1, as if they hadn't seen each other since the Rebellion. How the fuck did Euron assemble such a massive armada in a short amount of time? He said, build 1,000 ships. Did they actually build all of those ships? In what, 3 episodes? So I recently got into a discussion on whether or not the Greyjoys could really build 1,000 ships with their resources, manpower, and time. The big problem with this question is that we don't really know what type of ships are being built. So in the book, 900 or so of the Ironborn ships are just long ships, which only take about 100 trees to build. So that's 90,000 trees, which means assuming a generous 500 trees per acre means about 180 acres of forest. Then there's the bigger ships. They can be tree hogs, taking 1,000 trees to build. In the books, the Ironborn only have about 100 of these larger ships, so that's 100,000 trees, and so that's another 200 acres of forest. So 380 acres total. And that's pretty doable for the Iron Isles. Now in the show, Euron also boasts 1,000 ships, but we only see maybe 100 ships in this panning shot. So it's completely possible that Euron's show fleet has a similar makeup to his book fleet. But even 1,000 big ships would require 2,000 acres, which isn't unreasonable for the Iron Isles. And yes, I'm ignoring tar and all of the other resources that go into building a ship. All I'm saying is that it's not impossible for the Iron Isles to build 1,000 ships with the resources they have. Now, manpower and time are another issue. Long ships, we can grant them. The Ironborn probably commonly know how to make these and can pop them out really fast. But these huge military ships are more complicated. Yes, one of these large ships can be built in a few months, but they aren't building just one ship, or a dozen. They're building 100 at least, maybe even 1,000. How many people would really have the expertise to build these types of ships? And we can kind of figure out how many people they have based on how many ships they used to have. Let's suppose for a moment that Theon and Yara stole 100 large ships, and those ships each have a lifespan of 10 years. That means the Iron Isles are used to producing 10 large ships a year. And that means they really only have the manpower and know-how to do about 10 ships a year. To surge to, at minimum, 100 ships in, at most, 6 months is a 2,000% surge in production. So, at the end of the day, no, it's just not realistic that Euron built this fleet so fast. But compared to a lot of other things we've seen, it's not that egregious. Are we just going to ignore how incredibly inconsistent winter is in the Riverlands? A raging blizzard at the farmer's cottage, not even a snowflake near the twins? So I actually put a little time into figuring out where Arya and the Hound were in the last episode. So let's first figure out where the farmer lives. So we know in episode 3.10 that Arya and the Hound were at the twins at the Red Wedding. They escape the twins and then sometime later kill some Frey soldiers. We next find them at an inn, which implies that they've made it to a main thoroughfare of traffic, so I imagine they've gotten to the King's Road. This is when they kill Polliver. Now in the book, they kill Polliver at the inn at the crossroads, but it doesn't really make sense for this inn to be that inn in the show. We next meet the farmer in episode 4.3, and he must live near the King's Road as the Brotherhood also runs into his house on their way north. After the incident with the farmer, Arya and the Hound are then in an indiscernible location in episode 4.5, and then again in 4.7 when they kill Rorgan Biter. In episode 4.8, they've made it to the Eyrie. So we kind of know that the farmer lives somewhere in this blue region not too far from the King's Road. So yes, it's ridiculous that the Hound is experiencing a blizzard when Arya is experiencing nothing. My explanation is that these scenes happen weeks, if not months apart. Apparently the Archmaester Sam is talking to is Archmaester Marwyn. Do you dare hope, Preston? Will we get a glass candle? Will we get Sorella? I thought he was Marwyn at first as well, especially being the only Archmaester to believe Sam. Later on, I found out he was billed as Archmaester Ebrose. In the books, Ebrose is the expert in healing, and I imagine commonly dissects dead bodies. Qyburn wanted to surpass his skills by opening live bodies. Sadly, I doubt we'll ever get any glass candles or Sorella sand. If I had done the Dornish plot, I would have had Ellaria constantly talk about how there are 4 sand snakes, and everyone would be wondering, 4? I only count 3. And then it would be a fun surprise when Sam's classmate turned out to be the 4th sand snake. Alternatively, I would have had one of the existing sand snakes, say Taina or Obara, just disappear for a while, and then it would be a fun surprise when she reappeared as one of Sam's classmates. Ah well, missed opportunities. Where is Sweet Robin? Did they leave him in the Vale, or is he just determined to beat the Onion Knight in the silent game? I can only assume he is hanging in the Vale, failing at weapons training, and playing with his really cool falcon. Obviously, I certainly hope he shows up. Robin is actually the longest reigning lord in Westeros, being Lord of the Vale since the first episode when his father died. But I don't see how or when he would show up, actually. None of the plot lines have any pressing reason to go to the Vale, and I don't see any reason for him to leave. The rest of the world is a mess, and Robin has every reason to stay put where it's safe. Now, I suppose Dany could fry him with some dragons, or Euron could conquer the Vale while the Vale army is up north, but they all have bigger fish to fry. Additionally, there have been no reports of Lino Facioli doing any filming. And that's all for now. We'll see you guys next time with the Episode 1 podcast. Thanks for watching.